I think the thing that Puig set up, and I was trying so hard to capture, is that if you put two people in a cell and take away everything, and they just have to start to see each other as individuals, he could see the woman that Molina felt he was, I do think that ability just to try to push all that aside and look in each other's eyes and see who is that, is a great thing.
Hello, and welcome back to The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America. In this episode, two prisoners form an unlikely bond in a brutal Argentine prison in director Bill Condon's musical drama, Kiss of the Spider-Woman. This reimagining of the 1976 novel and Tony Award-winning Broadway musical tells the story of Valentín, a political prisoner who shares a cell with Molina, a gay window dresser convicted of public indecency. To escape the grim reality of their incarceration, Molina entertains Valentín by recounting the plot of a Hollywood musical starring his favorite silver screen diva, Ingrid Luna. In addition to Kiss of the Spider-Woman, Condon's other directorial credits include the feature films The Good Liar, Beauty and the Beast, Mr. Holmes, The Fifth Estate, The Twilight Saga, Breaking Dawn Parts 1 and 2, Kinsey, and Gods and Monsters. He was nominated for the DGA Award for Outstanding Directorial Achievement in Feature Film for his 2006 film, Dreamgirls. Following a screening of the film at the DGA Theater in Los Angeles, Condon spoke with director Greg Berlanti about filming Kiss of the Spider-Woman. Listen on for their spoiler-filled conversation.
Bill.
Hey.
Amazing.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for coming. Thanks for staying.
For being here.
On a pretty Sunday.
Yeah. Those cheers are because you made not just one, but I think two, arguably three great movies in this movie in terms of fitting them all together. And I loved every single one of them. And I'm going to ask you about all of them.
Oh, that's nice.
I have a personal confession I have to make first, which is I've known Bill for decades. We used to live on the same street, in fact. So in addition to being a fan who appreciates just how talented he is, as a person, I know how humble Bill is. So I'm sorry to embarrass you, Bill, but I have to make a few proclamations today in your presence, which is the first is I don't think that there's a filmmaker alive today that's arguably done more to contribute to the modern American movie musical than Bill Condon. From your writing work on Chicago and Greatest Showman to directing such iconic hits as Dreamgirls and Beauty and the Beast, and now this film, which is just a masterwork in every regard, and for me just oozes romance and compassion and humanity and spectacle. It's both sublime, it's revolutionary, not to mention as topical and political as any film this year, and I think it really cements your tremendous legacy in the genre, and I'm so proud of you. So
good. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. We can stop there. No,
okay.
Thank you.
So we'll just dive into all the questions so we can get to all of them. So quick history. It was a novel by Manuel Puig, right? Then it was a play by him as well.
That's right. He adapted it.
Right, yes. Which became the 1985 Academy Award-winning film, or no, it won an Academy Award for William Hurt, right? But it was directed by Hector Babenco.
Yes.
Then it became a hit Kander and Ebb stage musical with a book by Terrence McNally with Cheetah Rivera. Which of those iterations were you familiar with first, and how did you decide to sort of really merge them all together into this sublime work?
Actually, all of them, starting with the novel, which I read, was I in college, right out of college. I loved it. And then I didn't know the play. I've never seen, it's a 2-character play that he wrote, adapted from the novel, very, very close to the novel. But the movie meant a lot to me. I was in my 20s as a young gay man. There weren't that many movies like that, and certainly a movie where William Hurt, who's at the height of his popularity, playing a gay window dresser, was really remarkable, and it meant a lot to me. And then obviously the musical, it was, there's this great tradition of incredibly interesting, dark, rich musicals that Kander and Ebb did with Harold Prince. They did Cabaret together. And this was the last one they did together, and it really is remarkable. So I'd known all of them.
And what was your aha moment of, okay, I know how this can actually work as a movie musical.
Yeah, I think it all comes out of the cabaret movie, which I think is the, still the ultimate movie musical I think that we all aspire to. But Fosse there made this really difficult decision to jettison 60% of the score and to only put the numbers on the stage at the Kit Kat Club, And I thought, Rob had that idea that it was all in Roxy's mind in Chicago, right, which put all the numbers onto the vaudeville stage, right? And this, it always felt to me like this was the other one that really should be made. We all many of us love stage musicals, but very few of them should be movies. They really, the really good ones, like A Chorus Line, is so innately theatrical, that I'm not sure it survives in this medium. But this one, the one thing that's remarkable is that, Sally Bowles in Cabaret, Roxy Hart in Chicago, and Molina in this movie, they're in many ways the same character, Wow. They're people who are desperate in their own lives, who have this fantasy about what show business can do to them and the happiness that they might find there, But this one specifically, compared to the other two, which have a kind of theatrical bent, this is about movies. His imagination takes him to the movies. So it just felt like the great unmade musical.
And you wrote it on spec, correct?
Correct, yes.
I hope the WGA members here also, like myself, are listening to that. So you wrote this, you still to this day, an Oscar on your shelf somewhere.
Yeah.
Though you're humbled, it's not in your entrance to your house, right, when you walk in.
No.
But you wrote it on spec. So you were that clear about the vision of it.
Yeah, no, I actually went to Terrence and to John Kander almost 10 years ago and said, I'd love to make this, but it has to be done, we have to stay true to the novel and true to what it is, which means it can't be done with the studio, and it certainly can't be done with studio notes and interference, right. So I said to them, I'd like to write it on spec, and will you let me do it for free? I don't have any money to give you. They said, great.
Wow. And
then it took 7 years to figure out who had the rights. Barry Josephson finally did that, and we were there was, and then Tom called and said, are you still interested? And I absolutely was, and dove right in. And it's weird because it very much mirrors what I did with Gods and Monsters, right. Where writing on spec, when you do something like that, you really have to have an image of how is this going to get made, And it's really tough to make a musical at a certain, budget level, right? Because they just demand a certain lavish approach. But the thought I had here, well, we'll do a 35-minute musical at top dollar, and then we'll make a very, very scrappy independent movie for the other, almost 2 hours.
And that story within the film is totally crafted for this movie.
That's right. Yes, that is. It's funny in the original novel, the Spider Woman. He basically talks about 5 or 6 different movies. Cat People, the great film noir from the 40s, but he mentions a Spider Woman character at the end. I was always sort of confused why no one ever made us Kiss of the Spider Woman movie. It seems so obvious, but that's where I started because I was starting with the score, and to try to figure out. And I also knew that most of that score was going to be within the movie, Were you super clear on which songs were going to be from the outset? Wasn't super clear because there are songs I absolutely love from the show that I was hoping to be able to fit into the scheme, but they didn't, But I did know, in the show, there's no single Kiss of the Spider. She's just a star who sings, numbers from various shows, so various movies. But that was the fun puzzle, to realize if you're going to jump back and forth between these two worlds, then what's happening in the movie has to somehow push forward the story of what's happening with these two guys. So that became, the board, right? The board we all work from, and this putting this there, that there, and inventing something.
And knowing that they would play multiple parts across both of those things.
That's right, yes.
And so talk about casting Jennifer.
Well, yes.
And her helping make it real. But she's
absolutely.
I love that she's playing 3 parts in this because to me, she is the consummate triple threat. And you really show every element of what she can do in such.
Yeah, we're joking.
She seems like she's ripped right out of the 1950s musicals. That
yes.
Emulating.
She and I were joking yesterday that there will be like groups of 3 queens on Halloween night, playing all three versions of Jennifer Lopez in this movie, which I'm hoping.
Yes. I actually was sitting next to a friend of mine, and we're both gay, and I made that joke to him during when we were watching the movie, actually, that he would be dressed up as
exactly. Well, she said the challenge is I want somebody to do all three in one. I want it to be one person. But no, the thing is, Jennifer.
So you sent her the draft.
Sent her the draft, and she said yes, really, basically right away, which was, those things that people do that you're just going to be eternally grateful for. Nothing exists without it. She just, it just spoke to her and she wanted to do it. But yeah, she's playing these three parts, but specifically in the style of, and this is something I think it was so remarkable to watch her commitment to capturing the style of mid-century Hollywood glamour. Those women were all sent to elocution school. They had that mid-Atlantic accent, and she didn't want to overdo it, but there's a line at the end, I finally found love and now you ask me, and ask, she just got those little things so right, but I think it's also.
And as a director, which one of those do you explore first with her when you're in rehearsals or working on?
Which of the character?
When she's playing multiple parts?
Yeah, it was Aurora. I think that was the dominant character because Aurora, she had this perception. She was right. Aurora basically, at a certain point, Valentín says, "Why do I get the feeling you're making all this up?" And he says, "It might be, Yeah. And there is a sense in which Molina so identifies with Aurora, someone who is incapable of love. And that's the story of this movie that he loves so much, that there's a curse that gets lifted, right? So she understood that this was being filtered through Molina so that the Aurora that she was playing would mirror some of the things that he's feeling as he's opening himself up to love in that cell. They're both opening up to the same person, right? Played by Diego Luna. Right. So that insight of hers really was our starting point for working on Aurora.
And how about Diego coming to his role? How did that happen?
Yeah, well, again, Diego, first choice. The thing is, it's a part that sometimes has been played as the macho guy, and he
has so much sensitivity in this.
He does, and
I really found myself experiencing the movie a lot of times through his.
I agree.
His empathy and sensitivity and his growth.
I think he's the glue. He really is. And he's just a flat out great actor, But for him, the convincing that needed to be done, and it took a while, was he's a perfectionist and he wanted to make sure that he could become Gene Kelly, Wow. And again, it's a level of detail. It's not just dancing with Jennifer Lopez, which, let's face it, is intimidating. But it's the way he strolls across a set. He said, this actor would have been a song and dance man, and he'd been cast because of that. So the way, again, he sort of developed this entirely different physicality. He got excited by that, but I got to say, he came to New York and we started choreography rehearsals and he still hadn't committed, and he said, wow, I have a lot of work to do. And then we sent over an assistant there to work with him in Madrid.
Oh, wow.
For weeks and weeks until he felt comfortable.
And the brilliant discovery that is Tonatiuh?
Tonatiuh,
right.
Yeah.
Tonatiuh.
Yes. Oh, yeah. He's
talk about, well, and finally, I think of all the iterations, having this part played by an authentically queer actor.
That's right. Yeah. That was
also a song and dance person and also a brilliant performer. And
I know that was a challenge when it came to casting. You're not only casting Molina, and I did want it to be a Latin actor and I wanted it to be a queer actor. Yeah. So that already, is a smaller group, right? But then he's also playing Kendall, and that meant he had to be a song and dance man. So this, I remember seeing his self-tape audition, and it just blew me away. It's one of those things, obviously there was a lot of intimate work that happened between us, but it was there. It's him.
What was the casting process like with him and the others once you introduced him into the mix? Yeah, did you see that chemistry right away between?
No, not at all. No. So it was really 2 trips for him, 2 Zooms and then 2 trips to New York one for choreography and things like that. And then finally with Diego. And we just sat and read the script and did some scenes, and I filmed him again with him. And that was, so we put him through his paces.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you shot the 2 separate cities.
Yes.
So 2 movies in 2 cities. So that's 2 crews.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
A few
what kind
people,
of prescription drugs are involved in having to.
Well, Tobias Schliessler, our wonderful camera DP cinematographer, is here, and
Amazing.
he
Amazing. Yeah, talk about your prep work and how you prep across 2 separate.
Yeah, he's one of a handful, obviously straddle both.
And you did the musical first.
First, right, which was a great kind of, I don't know, it turned out to be wonderful that everything that Molina was describing, he already knew. He'd already been in, so it gave a reality to it. And it did allow us, when we did that movie for 17 days, we shot it in New York on sound.
11 musical numbers.
That's right, yes.
In 17 days.
Right, it was crazy. It was insane.
So I looked this up, and American in Paris, just one number took them a month.
I know. I know. And
so I just think it's another tremendous accomplishment that you achieved that. I mean, you're doing almost a number a day.
Yes. And
wow.
The word for that is Jennifer Lopez, right? I mean, it's just incredible to watch. She kept saying she has to drill stuff until it's in her bones. And I knew she was doing that. But man, to see her do Where You Are, that number in the middle, and then the next day come and do Gimme Love. The next day. It was just incredible. And we had to finish that day because we were going on to something else the next day. It was, I've never seen anything like it.
And how are you dividing your time between prepping the separate cities? Because it was an abbreviated.
It was.
I mean, it was the
short prep. Yeah.
Kind of prep we have on TV pilots and stuff. Truly, when I was looking at it, I was kind of, you got the crew together, everybody in December. You were shooting in March.
Yep. Yeah.
Wow.
If I'm being honest, I told myself the other movie wasn't happening. I couldn't really think about it. I knew that we'd go there and have 3 weeks to prep.
Okay.
But we didn't even, when we got there, let's face it, that's a 2-character play, like the one that Puig wrote, So, 65 pages of dialogue in that cell. So that was
had you rehearsed
no.
that prior either?
Okay. We'd read through it because obviously there's a connection between what's happening emotionally in both parts, but we really didn't get down to it until we got there, and we rehearsed it on the set with Tobias. Obviously the big challenge is when you've got those 4 walls and you've got so many scenes.
I was so amazed by, I never felt claustrophobic in any way whatsoever. It never felt like you were even using the same angle.
Well, that's what I was hoping. We didn't. We really tried to figure out different approaches to different scenes. As an example, I think there's a moment when Molina is crying and Valentín goes over and joins him in his cell. And, the movies start to merge into each other. There's a real grittiness in Tobias's approach in the first part. But by then, he's Molina sitting there, he's just so lit in such a beautiful, romantic way. It's like the ideas of the movie are making their way into the cell. And that was part of the kind of thrill of being able to have done the one and then do the other. And the other thing is we shot in order. Right. So we were able, there was one scene.
Were there big discoveries as a result of that?
Huge all the time. But the one was a day before I was going to shoot a big scene after they'd made love. I was like, I don't believe in this. I'd written it. I don't believe in this scene anymore. I think we've moved beyond emotionally where I thought they were in the script. And I got there and we'd rehearsed it. It was a good scene. And I asked Diego and Tona and they were both like, no, you're right. We don't need it, So, and that's the fun of making an independent movie too, because usually you can imagine at a studio, it's like, you're shooting it, it's like, let us decide later. But it wasn't like that at all on this movie.
I'm so curious about, speaking of one of the things that's so tremendously authentic about it is the love story aspect being fully realized.
Yes.
And the intimacy between them.
That's right.
I mean, it reminded me of my own first love. I mean, it really brought up all those emotions and it was such a beautiful, tender love story. Are you approaching the intimacy in the same way you almost approach the musical numbers?
Well, that's a great question. And it is absolutely, and I do think it's both actors, but Diego, he saw that as the thing he really wanted to accomplish. He wanted you to take that journey with him toward finding love, For me, I'd made a movie about Kinsey all those years ago. And I always thought the great perception of his was not the Kinsey scale. It was that there are 8 billion different sexualities in the world, that it's as individual as a fingerprint, right? And I think the thing that Puig set up, and I was trying so hard to capture, is that if you put 2 people in a cell and take away everything, family, history, past, politics, and they just have to start to see each other as individuals, he could see, it's complicated. I don't think you want to even reduce it to one idea, but certainly he could see the woman that Molina felt he was, He started and he fell in love with Molina as a person. And I do think that especially, not to get Pollyannish about it, but because we are in, such a divided world right now, I do think that ability just to try to push all that aside and look in each other's eyes and see who is that, is a great thing, and specifically here, you're absolutely right. I always thought of this as a love story. And in those other versions, all of which were groundbreaking, right? Mm-hmm. There had been an introduction of a kind of transactional nature to the final kiss, to the making love, which wasn't in the novel. But I think to make audiences, a Broadway audience, Terrence talked about this. They added a song very late in previews, anything for him. If I do this, then he'll do that, Mm-hmm. And it was simply because even in 1993, a prosperous Broadway audience wasn't so comfortable with the idea that these guys actually loved each other, So that was that. There are a lot of, always when you remake something, it's why, and that was one of the that along with kind of living up to the this kind of incredibly, modern novel of gender fluidity, that hadn't been sort of explored before.
But I think with the beauty and simplicity that you express it helps, I think, all of us understand mm-hmm. that conversation even better. Mm. And I think I thought it was so radical in its way. I mean, not mm. to sort of jump to some of the bigger political conversations and themes, but did you have any idea when you were starting to work on this film and the writing of it, or even the beginning of the making of it, that sadly our world would start to echo this even more?
Yeah. I mean, we started shooting in March of the election year, right? But I'd written it a year earlier, so it was, it had become clear that specifically trans people were, going to be demonized in the election. So I obviously didn't expect what was, I didn't see what was going to happen, but you knew that was always going to be there, Yeah.
And now military on our streets.
Yeah, I know. It's strange, isn't it? Yeah. That is unexpected,
Right. I mean, that the resonance of the movie just,
mm-hmm.
Echoes even more.
Yeah.
And so what was that like in Sundance when you sort of, let me back up for one quick second. Yeah. You're in post. And you're putting the two films together.
Right.
And you're obviously just seeing for the first time if this grand experiment really is going to work. Mm-hmm. What was that like?
Terrifying. Absolutely. But what I love, Brian Cates, our editor, who's so great, but he stayed in New York. But by the time we went there, we had the musical numbers. He stays up to camera, we had the musical numbers.
And in the tradition of the MGM musical numbers, a lot of them are in wide shots.
Absolutely. That's right. That's very true.
And how does that impact editing in terms of you're not able to necessarily?
No, it's he has these tricks that I'd never heard. I'm sure these little things you cut a frame or two out and it ramps up suddenly. It's like it's kind of cool, but that I didn't quite know about. But so he pepped it up a little sometimes. But yeah, it was Tobias and I. We would every weekend we'd go to the hotel we were staying in Montevideo, and we'd start to drop the prison scenes in. Wow. And I remember that, and by the time we left, we sort of had the movie together, and so we got a sense, this is actually kind of working. But
is there a scene besides the infirmary where she comes into? Is there another one at all where there's not, where she comes into their
No, well, there's a hint of her, when Valentín almost dies, there's that. And no, but just that really.
And so you obviously then in post started showing it to audiences to sort of see if
exactly.
that
Yes.
connectivity all worked. And what was that experience like?
It was
Did
good.
you make any radical decisions based on
Not radical. It's just the typical thing. It was probably about 15 minutes longer, but it was mostly in the beginning and the end. It had started with Molina. I'd actually started with a scene from Kiss of the Spider Woman that he's narrating. He was in the gay section. So he's in a cell with a group of queens, and they're arguing about whether that happened the way he remembers it because they all know the movie, And then he's called in because he's being moved to Valentín's cell.
Right.
And it was just, I loved it, but you showed it with an audience and it's like, okay, you're in that Hollywood movie. He's narrating it. You're meeting these characters and then you're leaving. And it was like, no, just keep it simple. This is a story of these two guys, have them show up at the cell. It's one of those things you learn, right?
And I think the other thing that works so beautifully is you took out a lot of the songs of the prisoners singing to make that world feel more real. So
that's right. Yeah. Yeah. Sadly, again, beautiful songs. He has a great song, Dressing Them Up, that explains his career as a window dresser. It's a great song, but I just could not, in this version of it, imagine him breaking into song. We have little hints of it. He finishes the last bit of She's a Woman, to himself, things like that, little hints of it.
This may be random, but one of the films it reminded me of in terms of, I don't think I've seen another film besides this film that's a love triangle really between two people in the movies, besides Cinema Paradiso.
Right, that's true.
This was so resonant in that same way. And to be honest, I really find that theme in a lot of your work in terms of an outsider finding themselves through the arts or through love. And is that something that are you super conscious of that?
I'm not super conscious of it, but someone pointed out that the characters I'm drawn to do tend to be highly theatrical, often actors, and if they're not, still there's a certain heightened, kind of personality, which is the opposite of me, but I think I'm drawn to them because of that almost. But yes, I think especially they tend to be people who are drawn to show business in some way and also disappointed and let down by it. They're not often life's winners, which I like.
What were some significant musicals for you and your formation as an artist? And did you reflect on them when you were making this?
Oh yeah, so many of them. I was just started high school and saw Sweet Charity, and why I was drawn to this, masochistic story about a hooker in New York. But it was a movie I saw 9 times. It's because of Bob Fosse, obviously.
And correct me if I'm wrong. Was that not respected in its
No.
time?
It was highly criticized. It was at the end of that kind of roadshow, big budget musical, and they just went. The floor fell out. They went so out of fashion, that was one. But as I said, Cabaret is another one. But here specifically, it is the musicals of the period, that I referred to and really went back to see. And you look at some of them. I'm excited. I'm going to program an evening at TCM with Dave Carter, right?
Oh, amazing.
Of some musicals. But there's one. It was never a big hit. It was called Silk Stockings. It's Fred Astaire and Sid Charisse, and Molina mentions it in the movie. But if you look at that movie, it's political. Fred Astaire always was kind of a little right wing. It was Ninotchka remade as a musical, and she's representing, the kind of communist left perspective, and he's got the kind of, Hollywood right perspective. And of course, that wins the day. It was the Eisenhower administration, But you look at it, and there are just ways in which we're arguing, with each other that are like in its own silly way, very similar to what's going on now. So that's what I loved about those movies. They often had more in their minds than we give them credit for.
And you were reflecting on those in making this?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so quick lightning round.
Okay.
A couple of things.
Good.
What's a great musical that hasn't been made that you believe deserves to be?
Oh, wow. Yeah. I think Follies. I think everyone gives that answer. Stephen Sondheim's show, I got to pitch Sondheim an idea which I thought was really cool, and he liked, which is because that is a little like this, that lives in these two worlds of people who are coming back from a party and the shows that they put on 30 years ago. And I was like, well, what if we take those songs in this more realistic medium and make it about what was going on when you made Follies and what Hal Prince is going through and Michael Bennett and you. But then there was one collaborator who said, over my dead body, and that was that. So, but I think that there's a good movie to be made there.
And what do you think is the most underrated?
There's
musical?
So many of them. The thing is, very few musicals are perfect, but some of them are great. I think recently a movie, probably Evita. I think Evita, what Alan Parker did in Evita, is remarkable. It's just a next level of his that incredible eye he had and that sense of it's a different kind of scope that he brought to it. And his use of editing against music there is thrilling. I think that's a major accomplishment.
Well, and I started with a proclamation. I'm gonna end with another one, which also might embarrass you. But as a gay filmmaker, I just admire you so much with everything you've done. I know that it's from Gods and Monsters to Kinsey now to this. These are movies that have to be willed into existence. And thank you for still at your level with all you've accomplished, still coming up with something as wonderful as this. I appreciate it and you and your work so much.
Well, that means a lot coming from Greg Berlanti. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another DGA Q&A. The Director's Cut is available wherever you listen to podcasts. And please share, subscribe, rate, and review. We'd love to hear your feedback, and you can help fellow film buffs find the show. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America.